The old pickup truck sputtered to a stop at the edge of Samuel Warren's property, a plume of dust settling around it. Samuel watched from his porch, weathered hands gripping a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee, as a woman in overalls climbed out and surveyed his dilapidated farm with interest rather than dismay. What Samuel didn't realize was that his simple act of kindness, lending this stranger his precious tools despite barely making ends meet, would transform not just his failing farm but the entire agricultural landscape of the valley. As the woman approached with purposeful strides and an oddly shaped device tucked under her arm, Samuel had no idea his life was about to change forever. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Now, let's get back to how a simple act of kindness transformed one man's life forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across Samuel Warren's farm as he trudged through the dusty soil, examining the withering corn stalks that stretched before him. The drought had been merciless this season, turning what should have been vibrant green fields into a disheartening patchwork of brown and yellow. Samuel ran his calloused fingers through his graying hair, the weight of another failed harvest settling heavily on his shoulders. At 45, Samuel's face was a roadmap of hardship, deep lines etched around his eyes and mouth, testament to years of struggling against unforgiving weather, fluctuating markets, and mounting debts. The farm had been in his family for 3 generations, a legacy he had sworn to maintain despite the bank's increasingly frequent letters threatening foreclosure. He made his way back to the farmhouse, a modest 2-story structure that had seen better days. The white paint was peeling, revealing weathered wood underneath, and several shingles on the roof needed replacing. Inside, the house felt emptier than usual since his daughter, Lily, had left for college on a scholarship 3 months ago. Though he missed her terribly, he'd never been more proud. She was the first Warren to attend university, and he was determined to ensure she could complete her education, even if it meant skipping meals and working from dawn till dusk. Samuel paused at his kitchen table, spreading out the bills that had accumulated over the past month. The numbers didn't add up, no matter how many times he recalculated. He was behind on his mortgage, the equipment loan, and the electricity bill. The recent breakdown of his irrigation system had been the final blow, rendering him unable to salvage what remained of his crops. "One more month," he muttered to himself, a mantra he had been repeating with diminishing conviction. Just need to hold on one more month. A distant rumbling sound pulled him from his calculations. Through the kitchen window, he spotted an unfamiliar vehicle making its way down the long dirt road that led to his property. Visitors were rare in this remote part of the county, especially ones who weren't bank representatives or debt collectors. The vehicle, a beat-up blue truck with what appeared to be strange equipment in the bed, came to a stop in a cloud of dust. Samuel stepped onto the porch, curiosity momentarily overriding his worries. A woman emerged from the driver's side, and Samuel was immediately struck by her appearance. She seemed to be in her late 30s, with curly dark hair pulled back into a practical ponytail. Her attire was utilitarian, faded overalls over a simple white t-shirt, work boots caked with mud, but there was something distinctive about her presence, a confidence that seemed at odds with her dusty surroundings. "Hello there," she called out, waving as she approached the porch. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I've got a bit of a situation." Samuel nodded cautiously. "What kind of situation?" "My truck's been making some strange noises, and I just noticed some fluid leaking." She gestured back toward her vehicle. "I was hoping I might borrow some tools to take a look. I'd fix it myself, but I'm a bit far from my own workshop." Samuel hesitated. His tools were among his most valuable possessions, carefully maintained despite their age. Some had been his father's, and a few even his grandfather's. In his precarious financial state, he could hardly afford to replace any that might get damaged or not returned. But there was something earnest about the woman's expression, and Samuel had never been one to turn away someone in need, despite his own troubles. "I'm Samuel Warren," he said, extending his hand. "Alexandra Chen," she replied with a firm handshake. "Most people call me Alex." "Let me get my toolbox," Samuel said after a moment's consideration. Might be able to help you figure out what's wrong too. Been fixing engines since I was tall enough to see under the hood. Alex's face brightened. That would be incredibly kind of you. I promise I'll return everything in perfect condition. As Samuel led her to the small shed where he kept his tools, he couldn't help but notice her taking in the farm with keen interest. It wasn't the usual cursory glance of a passing stranger, but an assessing look that made him slightly uncomfortable, as if she were cataloging every detail. You've got quite a bit of land here, she commented. Been in the family for generations, Samuel replied with a mixture of pride and weariness. Though these days, it's more trouble than it's worth. Drought's been brutal this year. I noticed your irrigation system seems to be offline, Alex said, gesturing toward the fields where sections of pipe lay disconnected. Samuel was surprised by her observation. Pump gave out last week, can't afford to replace it just yet. They reached the shed, and Samuel unlocked the padlock, swinging the door open to reveal his modest collection of tools, organized meticulously on a pegboard and in drawers beneath a workbench. This is impressive, Alex remarked, examining the arrangement with appreciation. You keep everything in excellent condition. Can't afford not to, Samuel said simply. As he gathered what she might need into an old toolbox, Alex's attention was drawn to a stack of farming magazines in the corner, many with pages dog-eared and articles circled. You're interested in agricultural innovations? She asked, picking up one featuring an article on sustainable farming practices. Samuel nodded. Always looking for ways to do more with less. Not that I can afford most of the newfangled systems they write about. He handed her the toolbox. This should have what you need. There's a socket set, wrenches, pliers, screwdrivers, basic stuff. This is perfect, thank you. Alex accepted the toolbox with genuine gratitude. Would you mind if I borrowed these for about an hour? I should be able to diagnose the problem at least, maybe even fix it if it's what I think it is. Samuel glanced at his watch. He had planned to try again with the irrigation pump, but that could wait. Take your time. I'll be working around the property if you need anything else. As Alex made her way back to her truck, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unusual about her. Most travelers who broke down were anxious to be on their way, but Alex seemed almost content to be stranded on his failing farm. He pushed the thought aside and returned to his endless list of chores, determined to make some progress before the day ended. The bank might be closing in, but Samuel Warren wasn't one to go down without a fight. Hours passed as Samuel worked on clearing a section of field that had become overgrown with weeds. The physical labor helped quiet his anxious mind, though the nagging awareness of his financial situation never fully dissipated. He was so absorbed in his task that he almost didn't notice Alex approaching, toolbox in hand. Got it fixed? He asked, straightening up and wiping sweat from his brow. Not exactly, Alex replied, an odd expression on her face. Actually, there wasn't anything wrong with my truck. Samuel frowned, confusion giving way to wariness. What do you mean? Alex set the toolbox down carefully. I apologize for the deception, Mr. Warren. I didn't come here because my truck broke down. I came here specifically to see you and your farm. Samuel's body tensed, his mind immediately jumping to the worst conclusion. If you're from the bank… No, Alex interjected quickly, raising her hands in a placating gesture. I have nothing to do with the bank. I'm an agricultural engineer and inventor. I've been developing a new irrigation system, and I've been looking for a farm to test it on. When I was driving through the area and saw your property, it seemed like it might be a good fit. Samuel's wariness didn't subside. Why the story about the broken truck? Why not just say so? Alex had the grace to look embarrassed. Experience has taught me that farmers tend to be skeptical of outsiders coming in with new technology, especially female engineers. I thought this approach might give me a chance to get a sense of your operation before making my pitch. She met his gaze directly. I realize now that wasn't the right approach, and I apologize. Samuel studied her, trying to determine if she was being truthful. There was something disarmingly sincere about her expression. What kind of irrigation system? He asked finally, curiosity getting the better of his caution. Relief flashed across Alex's face. It's a precision drip irrigation system that uses significantly less water than conventional methods. But what makes it unique? That it's coupled with soil moisture sensors and weather prediction algorithms to deliver water only when and where it's needed." End quote. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device, about the size of a deck of cards. These sensors communicate with a central hub that controls the water flow. The entire system can be monitored and adjusted from a smartphone or tablet. Samuel's interest was piqued despite his skepticism. "Sounds expensive." "The initial investment is substantial," Alex admitted. "But the water savings alone typically result in a return on investment within 2 growing seasons. And the yield increases can be significant." Samuel shook his head. "Even if what you're saying is true, I couldn't afford something like that right now." "That's not what I'm proposing," Alex said quickly. "I'm looking for a partner farm to test and refine the system. I would cover the costs of installation and equipment. All I would ask is for your feedback and data on how the system performs." Samuel blinked, certain he had misheard. "You want to install this system on my farm? For free?" "Not exactly free," Alex clarified. "Your expertise and feedback would be invaluable to me, and if the system performs as I expect it to, I would use your farm as a case study when I take the technology to market. It's a mutually beneficial bias arrangement." Samuel's mind raced with questions and doubts. It seemed too good to be true, and in his experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. "Why my farm? There must be bigger operations that would make better test sites." Alex nodded, as if she had anticipated this question. "I've approached larger farms, but they're invested in their existing systems and resistant to change. What I need is a smaller, more agile operation, where I can make quick adjustments and see immediate results." She gestured toward his fields. "Your farm has the right scale, soil composition, and crop diversity for what I'm trying to achieve." Samuel remained skeptical, but found his interest growing. "If there was even a chance this could help save his farm, I'd need to think about it," he said cautiously. "And I'd want to know more about this system of yours." "Of course," Alex agreed readily. "Take all the time you need. I can leave you some information about the technology and my previous work." She reached into her truck and retrieved a tablet. "I have some presentations and data from preliminary tests that might address some of your questions." As they sat on Samuel's porch reviewing the materials, his initial skepticism began to give way to guarded optimism. Alex's knowledge was evident as she explained the technical aspects of the system, answering his questions with the confidence of someone who truly understood farming challenges. By the time dusk fell, casting long shadows across the farm, Samuel found himself actually considering her proposal. The idea of partnering with this strange, brilliant woman on a cutting-edge agricultural system seemed surreal, yet the potential benefits were too significant to dismiss outright. "I'll sleep on it," he told her as their discussion wound down. "But I'm not making any promises." Alex smiled, gathering her materials. "That's all I'm asking for, Mr. Warren. A chance to show you what's possible." As he watched her drive away, Samuel couldn't help but wonder if this unexpected encounter was the miracle he had been hoping for, or just another false promise in a long line of disappointments. Either way, for the first time in months, he felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to Samuel's restless night. He had tossed and turned, his mind cycling between excited possibility and cautious doubt about Alex's proposal. By the time he made his way to the kitchen to brew a pot of coffee, he had decided to at least hear her out further. What did he have to lose? As if summoned by his thoughts, a familiar blue truck appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust as it approached his farm. Samuel felt a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness as he stepped onto the porch, coffee mug in hand. Alex parked and emerged from the vehicle with a bright smile, carrying what looked like a large metal case. She was dressed similarly to the day before, practical clothes for fieldwork, but there was an unmistakable energy in her stride. "Good morning," she called out. "I hope I'm not interrupting your breakfast." "Just coffee," Samuel replied, raising his mug in greeting. "Early riser?" "Always have been," she said, setting the case down carefully. "There's something about the early morning light that helps me think clearly. I brought something I thought might help you make your decision." Samuel raised an eyebrow questioningly. A working model, Alex explained, patting the case. I thought a demonstration might be more convincing than all the technical specifications in the world. Samuel couldn't deny his curiosity. Lead the way. They walked to a small section of his vegetable garden, where the soil was particularly dry and cracked. Alex knelt down and opened the case, revealing an array of components: thin tubing, small sensors, a control unit, and what appeared to be a miniature solar panel. This is a scaled-down version of the full system, she explained as she began to assemble the components with practiced ease. It won't cover much area, but it will give you an idea of how it works. Samuel watched with growing interest as Alex inserted the sensors into the soil at different depths, connected them to the control unit, and then attached the tubing to a small water reservoir she had brought along. The sensors are constantly monitoring soil moisture levels, she explained, pointing to tiny blue lights that had begun blinking on the devices. They're also analyzing soil composition and temperature. All this data feeds into the control unit, which determines exactly when, where, and how much water to deliver. She pulled out a tablet and tapped on the screen, bringing up a colorful interface showing real-time data from the sensors. See these readings? They're telling us that this particular spot is severely moisture deficient, especially at the root level where it matters most. Samuel leaned in, fascinated despite himself. The technology was more sophisticated than anything he had seen before, yet the interface was surprisingly intuitive. Now, watch this, Alex said, tapping a few commands on the tablet. The system hummed to life, and Samuel observed with amazement as water began to flow through the tubing in a precisely controlled manner, delivered directly to the root zones of the plants rather than sprayed over the surface. Conventional irrigation wastes a significant amount of water through evaporation and runoff, Alex explained. This system delivers water directly where it's needed, when it's needed, in exactly the right amount. After a few minutes, she showed him the updated readings. See how the moisture levels have improved? And we've used only a fraction of the water a traditional system would require. Samuel was impressed, but still cautious. It's one thing to make a garden patch look good. It's another to irrigate 50 acres of corn and soybeans. Alex nodded in acknowledgement. Absolutely, and I wouldn't expect you to commit based on this alone. But imagine this technology scaled up across your entire farm, with the added benefit of weather prediction algorithms that can anticipate rainfall and adjust accordingly. She pulled up another screen on her tablet, showing a satellite view of his farm, with overlaid zones in different colors. This is a rough simulation of how we might implement the full system. Each zone would be independently monitored and controlled, taking into account soil variations, crop types, and microclimates. Samuel studied the simulation, his farmer's instinct recognizing the potential. He knew every inch of his land, where the soil drained poorly, where it dried out too quickly, which sections got more sun or were more sheltered from the wind. The system Alex was proposing seemed to account for all these variables. And you're saying you'd cover the costs? He asked, still finding that part hard to believe. My company has secured research funding for this phase of development, Alex confirmed. Your contribution would be your expertise, your land as a testing ground, and your feedback on how we can improve the system. Samuel thought of the foreclosure notices, of Lily's college tuition, of the repairs the farmhouse desperately needed. If this system could indeed increase yields and reduce water usage, it might be the lifeline he needed. What's the catch? He asked bluntly. There's always a catch. Alex didn't seem offended by his directness. The system is still in development. There will be bugs to work out, adjustments to make. It will require patience and a willingness to experiment. She paused, meeting his gaze directly. And yes, I would need regular access to your farm to monitor the system and collect data. Samuel considered this. How long would this partnership last? I'm proposing an initial agreement for 1 growing season, Alex replied. After that, we can reassess based on the results. It was a significant commitment, allowing this stranger and her technology onto his land for an entire season. Yet the potential benefits were equally significant. I need to think about it some more, Samuel said finally. Maybe talk to a few people. Of course. Alex agreed readily. Take all the time you need. I can leave the demo unit with you if you'd like to experiment with it. Samuel nodded, trying not to show too much eagerness. That might be helpful. As they packed up the equipment, Samuel felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The prospect of embracing such cutting-edge technology was daunting, especially for someone who had been farming the same way for decades. But the looming threat of losing everything pushed him toward considering changes he might otherwise resist. I'll give you an answer by the end of the week, he promised, as Alex prepared to leave. She handed him her business card with her contact information. I look forward to hearing from you, Mr. Warren, whatever you decide. As her truck disappeared down the road, Samuel turned the card over in his hands. Alexander Chin, Ph.D. Agricultural Engineering and Sustainable Technologies, it read, alongside the logo of a company called AgriNova. The decision ahead felt monumental, a fork in the road that would determine not just the fate of his farm, but potentially his entire way of life. Samuel tucked the card into his shirt pocket and headed back to the fields, the weight of the choice heavy on his mind, but tempered by a cautious optimism he hadn't felt in a long time. 3 days later, after numerous calls to agricultural extension agents and hours of research online at the local library, Samuel made his decision. He had even swallowed his pride and called his daughter Lily at college, seeking her perspective. Her enthusiasm for the technology and encouragement to take the chance had been the final push he needed. When Alex returned to the farm, Samuel had his answer ready. Let's do it, he said simply, as they stood in his kitchen, the morning sunlight streaming through the window. But I have some conditions. Alex nodded, visibly pleased but maintaining a professional demeanor. I'm listening. First, I want everything in writing, clear terms about who owns what and what happens after the testing period, Samuel stated firmly. Second, I want to be involved in every aspect of the implementation. No changes to my farm without my knowledge and approval. Absolutely, Alex agreed without hesitation. I was hoping for your active involvement. Your knowledge of this land is invaluable. And third, Samuel continued, if at any point I feel this isn't working or is harming my crops, I have the right to pull the plug. No questions asked. Alex considered this for a moment before nodding. That's fair, though I'd ask for the opportunity to address any concerns before termination. These systems can require fine-tuning, and what might appear as a failure could simply need an adjustment. Samuel found this reasonable. Agreed. Alex's face broke into a genuine smile, and she extended her hand. Then it looks like we have a partnership, Mr. Warren. As they shook hands, Samuel couldn't help but feel he had just set something momentous in motion, though whether for better or worse remained to be seen. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity as Alex and her small team descended upon the farm, transforming it into a hub of technological innovation. The main irrigation system was installed first, with thin tubes running throughout the fields, connected to sensors that were strategically placed to monitor different soil conditions. Samuel worked alongside them every step of the way, offering insights about his land that no satellite imagery or soil analysis could capture. He pointed out the areas that always dried out first, the sections prone to pooling after heavy rain, the spots where certain crops thrived while others struggled. Alex absorbed this information eagerly, adjusting her plans to accommodate his knowledge. Samuel found himself impressed by her willingness to listen and adapt, a trait he hadn't expected from someone with her academic credentials. Experience beats theory every time, she told him one evening, as they reviewed the day's installation progress. I may have the fancy degrees, but you have decades of hands-on knowledge that's irreplaceable. The central control hub was set up in a corner of Samuel's barn, a sleek array of equipment that seemed out of place among the weathered wood and rusty tools. Alex patiently taught him how to use the tablet interface, showing him how to monitor soil conditions, adjust water delivery, and interpret the system's data. To Samuel's surprise, the technology was more intuitive than he had feared. The interface used simple color coding and straightforward graphics to display complex information, and within days, he found himself checking the system as routinely as he once checked his rain gauge. The first true test came when a section of young corn began showing signs of stress. In the past, Samuel would have had to increase irrigation across the entire field, wasting water on plants that didn't need it. With the new system, he was able to target just the affected area, delivering precisely the amount of water required. "It's like having 100 farmhands, each one paying attention to a different plot," he remarked to Alex, as they observed the corn's rapid recovery. She beamed with pride. "That's exactly the idea. Farming at the micro level instead of the macro." As the summer progressed, the differences became increasingly apparent. While neighboring farms struggled with the persistent drought, Samuel's crops flourished with minimal water usage. The precision irrigation ensured that every drop went exactly where it was needed, while the weather prediction algorithms helped them prepare for the rare rainfall, adjusting the system to take maximum advantage of the natural precipitation. Word began to spread in the farming community. Neighbors who had initially scoffed at the sci-fi gadgetry started dropping by, curiosity overcoming skepticism as they witnessed the undeniable results. "Never thought I'd see the day when old Samuel Warren became a tech pioneer," commented Harold Jenkins, whose family had farmed the adjacent property for generations. "But I can't argue with those corn stalks. They're the healthiest in the county." Samuel took no pleasure in outperforming his neighbors. They were all fighting the same battle against increasingly challenging conditions, but he couldn't deny a sense of satisfaction. For the first time in years, he was looking at the possibility of not just a surviving crop, but a thriving one. More significant than the agricultural success, however, was the unexpected friendship developing between Samuel and Alex. Their partnership had begun as a strictly professional arrangement, but long days working side by side and evenings spent analyzing data had fostered a genuine connection. Samuel found himself sharing stories of his late wife Margaret, who had passed away from cancer 5 years earlier. He spoke of how she had kept the farm's books with meticulous precision and had always pushed him to consider new farming methods, even when he had resisted. "She would have loved all this," he admitted one evening as they sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Margaret was always more forward-thinking than me." Alex listened with quiet empathy. In turn, she shared her own journey, how she had grown up in an urban environment but had become fascinated with agriculture during a college internship. How she had faced skepticism and occasionally outright hostility as a woman in a male-dominated field. How she had persevered because she believed deeply in the potential of technology to address the global challenges of food security and water scarcity. "My colleagues thought I was crazy to focus on small to medium farms instead of courting the big agricultural corporations," she confided. "But I've always believed that's where the real impact can happen, one family farm at a time." As July gave way to August, the promise of an exceptional harvest loomed on the horizon. The corn stood tall and vibrant, the soybeans were lush and healthy, and even the experimental section where they had planted drought-resistant varieties developed by Alex's company showed remarkable progress. But with success came new challenges. The data collected by the system revealed patterns and insights that sometimes contradicted conventional farming wisdom, leaving Samuel torn between trusted methods passed down through generations and the evidence presented by the technology. "The system is suggesting we reduce irrigation in the north field, even though the forecast shows no rain for the next week," he pointed out to Alex one morning, concern evident in his voice. "The sensors are detecting adequate moisture at the root level," she explained, showing him the detailed readings. Overwatering at this stage could actually inhibit root development and make the plants less resilient. It went against everything Samuel had been taught, but he reluctantly agreed to follow the system's recommendation. A week later, the crops in that field were thriving despite the continued dry conditions, their roots having grown deeper in search of water, ultimately creating stronger plants. These moments of doubt and vindication became a pattern as Samuel gradually learned to trust the technology, not blindly, but as a powerful tool that complemented rather than replaced his own knowledge and instincts. As harvest time approached, excitement and anxiety mingled in equal measure. The crops looked promising, but the true measure of success would be in the yield numbers and quality metrics. Both Samuel and Alex knew that the future of their partnership and possibly the future of Alex's technology and the wider market hinged on these results. The first day of harvest dawned clear and cool, a perfect early autumn morning. Samuel had arranged to rent a combine with Alex, covering half the cost as part of their agreement. As the massive machine rolled through the cornfields, cutting and husking the golden ears, Samuel felt a surge of emotion he couldn't quite name. Part pride, part disbelief, part vindication. The yield monitors on the combine told the story in cold, hard numbers. Production up nearly 40% from the previous year, with significantly less water usage. The quality metrics were equally impressive, with the corn showing excellent maturity and nutritional content. "This is beyond what even I expected," Alex admitted, as they reviewed the data that evening, her face glowing with excitement. "The system performed better in real-world conditions than in any of our controlled tests." Samuel allowed himself a rare moment of unbridled optimism. If the rest of the harvest continues like this, it's not just a good year, it's a game changer. The next day, however, brought an unwelcome surprise. As Samuel was preparing to continue the harvest, a black sedan pulled up to the farmhouse. A man in an expensive suit emerged, his demeanor sharply at odds with the rural setting. "Mr. Warren?" he called out, approaching with a confident stride. "I'm James Harrington from Agri-Tech Innovations." Samuel greeted him with cautious politeness, instantly on guard. Agri-Tech was one of the largest agricultural technology companies in the country, known for its aggressive business tactics and focus on serving large corporate farms. "I'll get straight to the point," Harrington said after brief pleasantries. "We've been hearing some interesting things about what's happening on your farm. I'm here to discuss the possibility of Agri-Tech acquiring the technology you're testing." Before Samuel could respond, Alex's truck pulled up, and she quickly assessed the situation as she approached. Her typically open expression had hardened into something more guarded. "James," she acknowledged with a curt nod. "I wasn't aware you were visiting today." "Alexandra," Harrington replied with a thin smile. "I tried reaching you through official channels, but you've been difficult to contact lately." "Because I've made my position clear multiple times," Alex said, an edge to her voice that Samuel had never heard before. "AgriNova is not interested in an acquisition." Harrington's smile didn't waver. "Perhaps Mr. Warren would be interested in hearing our offer before decisions are made. After all, he has a significant stake in this now, doesn't he?" Samuel looked between them, suddenly feeling caught in the middle of a conflict he hadn't anticipated. "Why don't we discuss this inside?" he suggested, not wanting to deal with this encounter in the open where curious neighbors might observe. In the kitchen, Harrington laid out Agri-Tech's proposal, a substantial sum for the technology patents, with a promise that Samuel's farm would receive the finished system for free in perpetuity as a BA. Test case homestead. The reality is that developing and marketing this kind of technology requires resources that a small operation like AgriNova simply doesn't have, Harrington argued smoothly. "With Agri-Tech's infrastructure, we could get this system to thousands of farms within a year." Alex remained silent, her jaw set, allowing Harrington to make his pitch. When he finished, she turned to Samuel. "What he's not telling you is that under Agri-Tech, this system would become so expensive that only the largest operations could afford it," she said quietly. "The family farms that need it most would be priced out of the market." "That's a rather cynical perspective," Harrington countered. "We believe in economies of scale. Higher initial adoption by larger operations would eventually bring costs down for everyone." Samuel listened carefully, aware that more than business models were being debated fundamentally different. Visions of agriculture's future were at stake. "Seems to me," he said finally, "that this decision isn't mine to make. The technology belongs to Alex and her company." "Technically, yes," Harrington acknowledged. "But your farm is providing the crucial data that will determine its market viability. Your endorsement would carry significant weight." It was a subtle pressure tactic, suggesting that Samuel had leverage he could use with Alex, perhaps for his own financial benefit. The implication wasn't lost on him. "Mr. Harrington," Samuel said, rising from his chair to signal the end of the conversation. "I appreciate your visit, but I trust Alex's vision for this technology. If she believes AgriNova is the best home for it, then so do I." Harrington's pleasant facade faltered slightly before he regained his composure. "I understand. but the offer remains open should either of you reconsider." He handed each of them his business card before taking his leave. After his car disappeared down the drive, an uncomfortable silence hung in the kitchen. Finally, Samuel turned to Alex. "You never mentioned other companies were interested in your technology." Alex sighed, running a hand through her hair in a gesture of frustration. "Agri-tech has been circling for months. They see the potential market value but not the social impact." She looked at him apologetically. "I should have warned you. They might approach you directly. I'm sorry." Samuel nodded, accepting her apology, but still troubled. "Is what you said true? About them making it unaffordable for farms like mine?" "That's their business model," Alex confirmed. "High-cost systems for industrial-scale agriculture. They're not interested in small or medium farms except as a potential market to capture later, after they've recouped their investment from the big players." Samuel processed this information, understanding now why Alex had been so passionate about developing and testing her system on his modest operation, rather than partnering with larger entities from the start. "What's your plan then?" he asked. "You must have one, or you wouldn't have turned down what I'm guessing was a very lucrative offer." Alex's expression brightened, her earlier tension giving way to enthusiasm. "Actually, I do have a plan, and I was going to discuss it with you after we completed the harvest data analysis." She pulled out her tablet and opened a presentation. "I've been developing a cooperative model that would make the technology accessible to small and medium farms through shared costs and resources." She explained her vision, a network of farms using the system, sharing data to continuously improve it, with costs distributed based on acreage and ability to pay. The technology would remain open source in key aspects, preventing any single company from monopolizing it. "It's ambitious," Samuel admitted after she finished. "And, honestly, it sounds a bit idealistic in today's agricultural economy." "Perhaps," Alex acknowledged. "But I believe it's possible with the right partners and the right proof of concept." She looked meaningfully around the kitchen, at the farm that had become their shared project. A farm like this one, showing what's possible when technology serves the farmer rather than the other way around. Samuel felt the weight of the moment, understanding that his farm had become more than a test site. It was potentially the seed of something that could transform agricultural practices across the region, and perhaps beyond. "Count me in," he said simply, extending his hand to seal their continued partnership. Alex's smile was radiant as she shook his hand. Whatever came next, they would face it together. An unlikely alliance of traditional farming wisdom and cutting-edge innovation. The remainder of the harvest surpassed even their optimistic projections. Samuel's farm produced yields that would have been impressive even in a year with ideal rainfall, let alone during a drought that had devastated many neighboring operations. The water usage statistics were equally remarkable, showing a reduction of over 60% compared to conventional irrigation methods. As word spread throughout the county about Samuel Warren's miraculous harvest, farmers began arriving at his property almost daily, curious to see the system that had defied the drought. Samuel found himself in the unexpected role of technology advocate, explaining the principles of precision irrigation to people who, like him, had been farming the same way for generations. "It's not about replacing what we know," he would tell them, standing in fields that remained green and vibrant while others had turned brown. "It's about enhancing it with tools that make sense for today's challenges." Alex often stood back during these impromptu tours, allowing Samuel to be the face of the innovation. She understood that other farmers would be more receptive to hearing about new technology from one of their own, rather than from an outsider with academic credentials. "You've become quite the spokesperson," she teased him one evening, as they watched another group of visitors drive away. "Maybe we should get you a company polo shirt." Samuel chuckled, still somewhat bewildered by the attention. "Never thought I'd be showing off computers to farmers who still track rainfall with a tin can." As fall deepened into winter, Samuel and Alex shifted their focus from harvesting to analysis and planning. The barn that had once housed outdated equipment now served as their command center, with computer monitors displaying colorful maps of soil conditions and water usage patterns across the farm. They spent long hours together, reviewing data and refining the system based on what they had learned during the growing season. Each had come to deeply respect the other's expertise. Samuel's practical knowledge of the land, and Alex's technical understanding of the underlying science, and they found that their partnership produced insights neither could have reached alone. "Look at this pattern in the eastern section," Alex would point out, highlighting anomalies in the soil moisture readings. "Any idea what might cause that?" Samuel would study the data, connecting it to his intimate knowledge of the landscape. "That area has a slight depression. Rainwater tends to collect there briefly before draining away, probably confusing your sensors." This exchange of information flowed both ways. Samuel found himself absorbing principles of agricultural engineering, while Alex gained practical insights that no laboratory simulation could provide. Beyond their professional collaboration, a deeper connection was forming. They shared meals more frequently, conversations extending beyond crop yields and water metrics to personal hopes and regrets, favorite books and films, stories of their respective journeys. Samuel learned about Alex's childhood in suburban Chicago, raised by a single mother who had cultivated her interest in science from an early age. Alex heard about Samuel's decades on the farm, the joy and heartbreak of agricultural life, the loss of his wife, and his deep pride in his daughter's academic achievements. As Christmas approached, Samuel received the best gift he could have imagined. Lily was coming home for the holidays. He threw himself into preparing for her arrival, cleaning the farmhouse from top to bottom and planning meals with a level of detail that amused Alex. "She's used to a bachelor household," he explained somewhat defensively, as Alex watched him meticulously dust the bookshelves. "And she's bringing a friend from college. Want to make a good impression?" "I'm sure she'll be happy just to see you," Alex reassured him. "But I understand. My mother still deep cleans whenever I visit, as if I'm inspecting her housekeeping skills." The day of Lily's arrival brought a nervous energy Samuel hadn't felt in years. When her car finally pulled up the long driveway, he was waiting on the porch, trying to maintain a dignified demeanor despite the urge to run to meet her. Lily emerged from the passenger side, a slender young woman with her father's determined chin and her mother's warm eyes. Behind her came a young man with glasses and a shy smile, whom she introduced as David, a fellow engineering student. "Dad!" she exclaimed, throwing herself into Samuel's embrace with the same exuberance she had shown as a child. "You look great. The farm looks great." Samuel hugged her tightly, a lump forming in his throat. "It's good to have you home, sweetheart." He showed them inside, where he had prepared a simple lunch. As they settled around the kitchen table, Lily's gaze fell on the tablet displaying the farm's irrigation data in real time. "Is that the system you mentioned on the phone?" she asked, immediately intrigued. "The one designed by Dr. Chen?" "It is indeed," Samuel confirmed, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "Actually, Dr. Chen should be stopping by later. She wanted to give us some family time first." Lily's eyes widened with excitement. "I've read some of her papers for my sustainable agriculture course. Her approach to integrating traditional farming wisdom with cutting-edge technology is exactly what I've been studying." Samuel blinked in surprise. "You never mentioned you were taking courses in agriculture." A slight blush colored Lily's cheeks. "I was waiting to tell you in person. I've added a minor in sustainable agricultural engineering. Professor Harris suggested it after reading my paper on water conservation techniques." Samuel felt a complex mix of emotions, pride in his daughter's academic achievements, surprise at this unexpected connection to his own recent experiences, and a wistful awareness that Lily was charting her own course, one that might bring her back to her roots in ways he hadn't anticipated. When Alex arrived that evening, the kitchen became a hub of animated discussion. Lily peppered her with questions about the technology, her eyes shining with enthusiasm as Alex explained the more technical aspects of the system. David, initially quiet, soon joined in with insightful questions about the machine learning algorithms that optimized water distribution. Samuel watched this exchange with quiet amazement, seeing his farm, his legacy through new eyes. What had begun as a desperate measure to save his livelihood had evolved into something that ignited passion in his daughter and potentially pointed toward a future he hadn't dared to imagine. Later, after Alex had gone home and David had retired to the guest room, Samuel and Lily sat on the porch swing, just as they had done countless times throughout her childhood. "I didn't expect you to be so interested in all this," Samuel admitted, gesturing vaguely toward the fields where the irrigation system lay dormant for the winter. Lily smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I've been thinking a lot about the farm lately, about what happens to places like this as climate change makes traditional farming more difficult." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "What you and Dr. Chen are doing here could be a model for family farms everywhere." "It's just a test project," Samuel said, though he couldn't help feeling a surge of pride at her words. "For now," Lily agreed. "But it could be more. Dad, have you considered what comes next, after the initial testing phase?" Samuel had been avoiding this question, focusing on immediate results rather than long-term implications. "Alex has some ideas about forming a cooperative, making the technology available to small farms at an affordable cost." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "That's a start. But have you thought about what this farm could become? A demonstration site, maybe even a training center for other farmers looking to adopt these methods?" The suggestion took Samuel by surprise. He had been so focused on survival, on making it through one more season, that he hadn't allowed himself to envision a more ambitious future. "That would be quite a change," he said cautiously. "Change is already happening," Lily pointed out gently. "The question is whether we shape it or let it shape us." In that moment, Samuel recognized Margaret's forward-thinking spirit in his daughter's words. It was both comforting and challenging, a reminder of what he had lost and what might still be possible. The holiday week passed in a blur of family meals, farm tours, and lengthy discussions about the future. Lily and David spent hours with Alex, diving deep into the technical aspects of the irrigation system and suggesting refinements based on their academic research. Samuel watched with growing amazement as these young minds engaged with the technology, seeing possibilities he had never considered. On their last evening together, as they sat around the kitchen table sharing a pot of coffee, Lily made an announcement that left Samuel momentarily speechless. "David and I have been talking," she began, a note of excitement in her voice. "We'd like to apply for a research grant to expand on what you and Dr. Chen have started here. If we're approved, we could spend the summer working on the farm, documenting the system's performance, and developing educational materials for other farmers." Samuel glanced at Alex, who appeared pleasantly surprised, but not entirely shocked, suggesting she might have had prior discussions with Lily about this possibility. That would be wonderful," Samuel managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "But what about your internship at that engineering firm you mentioned?" Lily exchanged a look with David. "This would be more valuable experience. Real-world application of what we're learning in class. And," she hesitated, "I've missed the farm more than I expected to." After Lily and David departed to return to college, the farm seemed unusually quiet. Samuel found himself standing in Lily's bedroom, looking at the posters of scientists and engineers she had added to the walls alongside her childhood keepsakes, tangible evidence of her evolving identity. "She's quite remarkable," Alex commented, finding him there with a distant expression. "You've raised an exceptional young woman." Samuel nodded, too full of conflicting emotions to speak immediately. Finally, he turned to Alex with a determined expression. "I want to move forward with your cooperative idea. And Lily's suggestion about turning the farm into a demonstration site. If she's willing to invest her future in this place, then so am I." Alex's face lit up with excitement. "Are you sure? It would mean even more changes, more technology, more visitors." "I'm sure," Samuel confirmed, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "For too long, I've been focused on preserving the past. Maybe it's time to help build the future instead." The winter months provided opportunity for planning and preparation. Samuel and Alex developed a comprehensive proposal for expanding the irrigation system to cover the entire farm. Incorporating the suggestions Lily and David had provided, they also began outlining what a farmer-centered cooperative might look like, with Samuel reaching out to neighbors who had shown interest in the CS technology. Harold Jenkins, initially one of the most skeptical neighboring farmers, became an unexpected ally after seeing the harvest results. "My grandson's been telling me for years that we need to modernize," he admitted during one planning session in Samuel's kitchen. Guess it took seeing it work on your place to convince this old dog. By early spring, their vision was taking concrete shape. Alex secured additional funding through a sustainable agriculture grant, allowing them to not only enhance the existing system, but also create educational materials and infrastructure for hosting demonstration events. Samuel, meanwhile, found himself embracing roles he had never anticipated: technology advocate, cooperative organizer, mentor to younger farmers interested in sustainable methods. The man who had once resisted change was now helping to guide it, drawing on decades of farming experience to ensure the new approaches remained practical and grounded in agricultural realities. As the soil warmed and planting season approached, anticipation built on the farm. This year would be different from the start: planned rather than reactive, hopeful rather than desperate. The foreclosure notices that had once littered Samuel's desk were replaced by cooperative membership agreements, system specifications, and correspondence with agricultural researchers interested in their work. On the first day of planting, Samuel stood at the edge of his fields watching the dawn break over land that his grandfather had first cultivated. The farm looked different now, with sensor arrays visible at intervals and the solar panels that powered the irrigation system gleaming in the early light. Yet the fundamental connection to the soil, to the cycles of growth and harvest, remained unchanged. Alex joined him, coffee mug in hand, respecting his silence as they watched the sun climb higher in the sky. After several minutes, she spoke quietly. "Having second thoughts?" Samuel considered the question seriously before shaking his head. "Not about the changes. Those are necessary. But I am thinking about what my father would say if he could see all this." He gestured toward the technological additions to the traditional landscape. "And what do you think he would say?" Alex asked. Samuel smiled, remembering his father's pragmatic approach to farming. "He always told me that a good farmer adapts or perishes." He was talking about weather patterns and market prices, not computerized irrigation. He paused, looking out over the fields. "But the principle's the same." He'd probably say it took me long enough to figure it out. Alex laughed softly. "From what you've told me about him, I think he'd be proud. Not just of the farm's success, but of how you've become a leader in helping other farmers adapt too." This was perhaps the most unexpected development of all that Samuel Warren, who had once kept to himself, focused solely on his own survival, was now at the center of a growing movement in the county. Farmers who had previously viewed each other primarily as competitors were now meeting regularly in his barn, sharing knowledge and resources, collectively investing in technology that no individual could afford alone. The spring planting proceeded with remarkable efficiency thanks to the systems guidance on optimal timing and conditions. Samuel found himself working in closer harmony with the natural rhythms of his land than ever before, paradoxically assisted by technology and becoming more attuned to subtle environmental cues. As May gave way to June, the first visitors beyond local farmers began to arrive. Agricultural extension agents, university researchers, even representatives from the state government came to see the innovative approach that was generating buzz in sustainable farming circles. Samuel had never been comfortable with public speaking, but he found that when discussing his farm and the technology that had transformed it, words came easily. Standing in his fields, pointing out the visible results of the precision irrigation, he spoke with natural authority that no academic credentials could confer. "The system doesn't replace the farmer's knowledge," he would explain to these visitors. "It enhances it. I still make the decisions, but now I have data to back up my instincts." Alex would add the technical details, explaining how machine learning algorithms continually refine the water delivery based on plant response, how the weather prediction components enabled proactive, rather than reactive management, how the networked sensors created a detailed picture of the farm's microenvironments. One particularly memorable visit came from a delegation of international agricultural officials, seeking solutions for water scarcity in their respective countries. As Samuel led them through a demonstration of the system's capabilities, he caught himself thinking of how far beyond his farm this technology might reach, potentially improving food security and resource conservation across continents. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked Alex that evening as they sat on his porch, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. When you first drove up pretending your truck was broken down, did you picture any of this? Alex laughed at the memory of her deception. I hoped the technology would prove itself and find wider application, she admitted. But no, I never imagined it would happen so quickly, or that, she hesitated, glancing at him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret, that I would find such a perfect partner in the process. The word, partner, hung in the air between them, carrying nuances beyond their professional collaboration. Over the months, their relationship had evolved in ways neither had anticipated. Shared meals had become a daily routine rather than a convenience, their conversations encompassing far more than agricultural technology, their comfortable silences speaking to a connection that required no words. Samuel had noticed the change, but had been hesitant to acknowledge it, uncertain of the boundaries between their personal and professional lives. Wary of complicating a partnership that had already brought such positive transformation to his farm and community. I've been thinking, he said carefully, about what happens when the grant period ends. When the testing phase is complete. Alex turned to face him more directly. I've been thinking about that too. The cooperative will continue, Samuel said, and the demonstration program. But what about? He gestured vaguely between them, finding it difficult to articulate the question. Us? Alex supplied, her direct approach cutting through his hesitation. Samuel nodded, feeling suddenly as awkward as a teenager despite his gray hair and weathered hands. Alex's smile was warm but tinged with uncertainty. I never planned to stay in one place this long. My work has always involved travel, moving from project to project. She paused, looking out over the fields that were becoming as familiar to her as her own childhood home. But I've been considering the possibility of establishing a more permanent base here. The cooperative needs ongoing technical support, and the university has expressed interest in having me lead a research team focused on expanding these irrigation methods. End quote. Samuel felt a surge of hope at her words. So, you might stay in the area? I might, Alex confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. If there were sufficient reasons, both professional and personal. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. Before Samuel could respond, his phone rang Lily calling for their weekly check-in. By the time the conversation ended, with updates on her grant application and end-of-term projects, the intimate moment had passed, though something had shifted in their understanding of each other. As summer progressed, the farm flourished under the combined influence of favorable weather, the precision irrigation system, and Samuel's experienced management. The corn grew tall and strong, the soybeans lush and healthy. Even the experimental section, where they were testing new drought-resistant varieties, showed remarkable progress. Local media began to take notice. A reporter from the county newspaper wrote a feature article about the Tex-AV traditional farmer revolutionizing water usage. A regional agricultural journal sent a photographer to document the system. A television crew from the nearest city spent a day filming for a segment on innovative responses to climate change challenges. Samuel found this attention alternately gratifying and uncomfortable. He had never sought the spotlight, content to work his land in relative obscurity. Now he was being asked to speak at farming conferences, consult with agricultural officials, even testify before a state legislative committee considering funding for similar initiatives. You're becoming quite the celebrity, Alex teased after one particularly busy day of interviews and demonstrations. Samuel shook his head ruefully. Not what I signed up for when I lent you my toolbox last summer. Yet he couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing his farm not just surviving, but thriving, of knowing that the methods they were pioneering might help preserve family farming as a viable way of life, despite mounting environmental and economic challenges. The cooperative model was gaining momentum, with 10 neighboring farms now connected to the central system, sharing data and resources. Harold Jenkins had become its most enthusiastic advocate, organizing information sessions in his own barn when Samuel's became too small to accommodate interested farmers from across the state. In July, Lily and David arrived to begin their grant-funded research, bringing fresh energy and academic perspective to the project. They established a small office in a corner of the barn where they documented every aspect of the system's performance and developed educational materials for future training programs. Samuel watched with quiet pride as his daughter moved confidently around the farm, equally at ease discussing sensor calibration with Alex and soil conditions with neighboring farmers. The technical knowledge she had gained at university complemented rather than replaced her deep familiarity with the land she had grown up on, creating a powerful combination that reminded Samuel of how his own partnership with Alex functioned. "You've got that look again," Lily commented one evening as they walked the property's perimeter, a ritual they had shared since her childhood. "What look is that?" Samuel asked, genuinely curious. "The one where you're thinking deep thoughts but not sharing them," Lily replied with a knowing smile. "Mom used to say she could practically hear the gears turning in your head." Samuel chuckled, acknowledging the accuracy of his late wife's observation, just marveling at how things change. "A year ago, I was counting pennies and wondering if we'd lose the farm. Now we're hosting delegations from around the world, and you're back here doing research that could help farms everywhere." And, Lily prompted, sensing there was more. Samuel hesitated, then decided his daughter was old enough for honesty. "And I'm wondering what happens next, with the farm, with the cooperative, with—" He paused. "With Alex." Lily's smile widened. "I was wondering when you'd bring that up. David and I have had a running bet on when you'd finally admit there's something more than professional collaboration happening there." Samuel felt heat rise to his face. "Is it that obvious?" "To everyone except maybe you and Alex," Lily confirmed with gentle amusement. "Dad, it's been 5 years since Mom died. She wouldn't want you to be alone forever." Samuel knew this was true. Margaret had been practical about such matters, even discussing them during her final months. "It's just complicated. Alex has her career, her company. The farm is my life, but it doesn't have to be hers. Maybe you should ask her what she wants instead of assuming," Lily suggested with the direct approach that reminded Samuel so much of her mother. "From what I've seen, she's pretty invested in this place, and not just the irrigation system." Before Samuel could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of an approaching vehicle. Alex, returning from a meeting with university researchers. As she stepped out of her truck, smiling and waving when she spotted them, Samuel felt a certainty settle over him. Regardless of what the future held, he was grateful for the present, for his farm's renewed vitality, for his daughter's return, and for the unexpected partnership that had made it all possible. August brought the culmination of their efforts as harvest time approached. The crops stood tall and healthy, despite the challenging weather conditions that had once again affected the region. The precision irrigation system had proven its worth beyond any doubt, delivering water with remarkable efficiency and adapting to changing conditions with minimal human intervention. A festive atmosphere pervaded the farm as they prepared for what promised to be an exceptional harvest. Neighboring farmers, who had joined a cooperative, gathered to share equipment and labor, reviving a tradition of community support that had faded in recent decades as agriculture became more individualized and, quote, competitive. On the evening before harvesting was set to begin, Samuel hosted a celebration on his property. Tables were set up in the yard, laden with potluck dishes brought by cooperative members and their families. Children played tag between the farm equipment, their laughter carrying across fields that symbolized not just agricultural success, but the revitalization of a way of life many had feared was disappearing. As twilight descended, Samuel found himself standing slightly apart from the gathering, taking in the scene with a sense of wonder. Alex approached quietly, handing him a glass of lemonade. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, following his gaze toward the assembled community. "Just thinking about how different this is from last year's harvest," Samuel replied. "I was alone then, just trying to salvage what I could before the bank took it all." Alex nodded in understanding. "And now?" "Now it feels like a beginning rather than an ending." He turned to face her directly. "We need to talk about what happens next, after the harvest, after the initial testing phase ends." "We do," Alex agreed, her expression serious but not somber. I've been offered a position at the state university, head of a new research center focused on sustainable agricultural technology. Samuel felt a momentary sinking in his stomach. The university was over 100 miles away, too far for daily commuting. That's a great opportunity, he said, trying to keep disappointment from his voice. It is, Alex confirmed. But I've made a counter-proposal. I've suggested establishing a field research station here, using the cooperative as a real-world laboratory. I would split my time between the university campus and here. Hope resurfaced as Samuel processed her words. Here? You mean, I'm not ready to leave what we've built, Alex said simply. The technology, the cooperative, the community. She paused, meeting his gaze steadily. You. Around them, the celebration continued, farmers and their families enjoying a moment of collective pride before the intense work of harvest began. But in that moment, for Samuel and Alex, the world narrowed to just the two of them, and the future they were tentatively beginning to envision together. I'm not good at this, Samuel admitted with a self-deprecating smile. Margaret used to say I was better at growing corn than expressing feelings. Alex laughed softly. And I've spent most of my adult life focused on my work, convinced that was enough. But this past year has changed me. Changed how I see my future. Samuel reached out hesitantly, taking her hand in his. I'd like you to be part of this farm's future. And mine. Alex's fingers tightened around his. I think I'd like that too. Before they could say more, they were interrupted by Lily calling everyone together for a toast. As they rejoined the gathering, Samuel kept hold of Alex's hand, a simple gesture that didn't go unnoticed by his observant daughter, who gave him an approving smile. Harold Jenkins raised his glass, his weathered face solemn. To Samuel Warren, who had the courage to try something new when the rest of us were too stubborn. And to Dr. Alexandra Chen, who brought the future to our doorsteps. Together, they've shown us a path forward for our borough, farms, and our community. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled farmers as glasses were raised in salute. Samuel, unaccustomed to being the center of attention, felt a flush of embarrassment, but also deep satisfaction. When urged to speak, he kept it simple. A year ago, I thought this farm story was ending, thanks to all of you. His gaze lingered on Alex, then moved to Lily and the gathered neighbors. It's just beginning a new chapter instead. The harvest proceeded over the following weeks, yielding results that exceeded even their optimistic projections. The cooperative's combined output set records for the county, achieved with water usage dramatically below historical averages. The data collected would provide valuable insights for future refinements and adaptations to different crops and conditions. As the last of the harvest was brought in, Samuel stood in a field of stubble watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. The earthy scent of freshly harvested land filled his nostrils, a smell as familiar to him as his own heartbeat, yet somehow sweeter this year. Alex found him there, her tablet tucked under her arm. Final harvest data compiled and analyzed. But as she reached his side, she simply slipped her hand into his. No words necessary as they contemplated the land that had brought them together, and the future stretching before them. The farm had been transformed, certainly. Modern technology now worked in harmony with traditional knowledge, sensors and algorithms, complementing generations of accumulated wisdom. But the most profound transformation had been within Samuel himself, from a man desperately clinging to the past to one helping chart a course toward a sustainable future. As darkness settled over the fields that had nourished his family for generations, Samuel felt a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. The simple act of sharing his tools with a stranger had set in motion changes he could never have imagined, opening doors he had thought forever closed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, expanding the cooperative, refining the technology, balancing tradition and innovation. But tonight, standing beside the woman who had unexpectedly changed his life, Samuel Warren was content with the harvest they had reaped, not just of crops, but of hope, community, and possibility.